I am going to find that card. In just a few minutes, you're going to hear today's guest, Robbie, speak those very words. Welcome to The Chase, a limited series on the Shallow End podcast feed. On Instagram, Robbie goes by 412 Sports Cards. And the card that he speaks about today is one of those needle in a haystack cards. It's a story of not being sure if you'll ever find it. Even if you do, can you pry it away from the current owner? Thanks for listening. My name is Dave Schwartz, Iowa Dave Sports Cards on IG. I'm thrilled to be able to bring you this limited series that focuses not just on a card, player run, or set, but most importantly, the process and thoughts behind the stories. Let's start with two spoilers. First, we've collected a diverse set of chases for you to hear about over the next couple of weeks. There's high end, low end, and everything in between. There's vintage up through ultra modern. There are guests you've heard from in the hobby space before, and there are collectors making their podcast debuts. And the second spoiler is that every episode has a happy ending. Every chase cataloged here ends with success. No heartbreak, no close calls, just the satisfaction of landing the card or cards you so badly want. So let's begin. This is The Chase. This is what sports card collecting is all about. Welcome into The Chase and the Shallow End. His name is Robbie. On Instagram, he is 412 Sports Cards. That's 412 _ Sports Cards. Robbie, thanks for being here. I'm excited to talk. What is your chase?
Thank you, Dave. I'm happy to be here. It's fun to get back in the podcast recording. My chase is the 2012-2013 The Cup Limited Logos Marc-Andre Fleury patch autograph out of 30.
Great. So before we get into the chase itself, what is your interest and background with Marc-Andre Fleury?
So 412, Pittsburgh area code. Grew up here, still live here. Big Pittsburgh sports fan. And in that time period, Pittsburgh Penguins were super successful. 3 Stanley Cups in my lifetime. Things aren't quite as rosy right now, but when I look on the 3 Stanley Cup winning teams, I think about Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, and Marc-Andre Fleury. Now, Sidney Crosby is a major PC of mine, but Malkin and Fleury both deserve their due. And I set out kind of on a journey to find 1 or 2 very nice cards of each one of them. One of them, my requirement was that it be a patch autograph because those are my favorite types of cards. And in hockey, it's a wonderful place full of game-used, chunky patch autographs. So I've had a lot of success and a lot of fun there. And Fleury was definitely one I had to chase down because a lot of great years. Number 1 overall pick.
I hear you. And I've said this to others before. You know, my budget constrains me to collecting just baseball cards. I would love to branch out into other things. But there's no card that is more attractive on the whole than a hockey card. Whether it's the Cup, it's maybe like the Cup. I love that set. Just the way that this hockey sweater lends itself to patches. There's no other, maybe something like NASCAR, but there's no other sport that has those beautiful patches. I hear what you're saying.
It's definitely true. And the hockey card world is a wonderful place where I kind of turned after some of the COVID flipping days to make the most of, some cheaper patch autographs. Are just awesome. You really can't go wrong with the hockey cards.
So say a little bit more about the card in particular, or the limited logos. Certainly if someone listens to some of the high-end auction coverage, you hear limited logos, but typically it's in the context of basketball. But that's Upper Deck, and Upper Deck nowadays and in the past is also the premier hockey brand, at least modern and ultra modern. So just tell us a little more about limited logos and how it fits into the sort of the collecting sphere.
Right. So you hear all the time about limited logos in basketball out of Exquisite. Well, The cup is made by the same person who made Exquisite. So we're talking, and it shares many, many subsets. I mean, we're talking basically about an Exquisite like product with some minor differences referred to just as the cup in hockey. In the limited logos is the main patch autograph set with a large patch window. Now, it says logos. It doesn't always have to be a logos. It's just a large patch. Typically numbered out of 50 is what I believe just the base limited logos runs are. They're not paralleled to death. You're looking at a out of 50 and that's your guy. But in this set, actually very interestingly, there are some that are run at shorter prints, and I think it's been the case in other years too. But like I know the Mario Lemieux is out of 25 in this year, and this Fleury that I wanted is out of 30. So we're looking at 30 copies, and I'll get into it a little bit, but this year of the Cup limited logos is very special because Marc-Andre Fleury's had a lot of limited logos cards. There's a number to choose from, but this one, and the listeners might see the picture of it on your Instagram feed, is featuring a patch from a Winter Classic jersey. So it's a felt-like special Winter Classic style patch, not worn in that game, but the Penguins wore that special jersey at home for 1-2 years. Really cool. Actually wearing one of mine right now, to get inspired for the recording. But my favorite Penguins jersey, he's featured in the Winter Classic picture on the card. You can see the Winter Classic patch on his chest. So we got the photo on the card is featuring the jersey style that the patch is being featured of. And it's right in that logo. So I've got the G and the U in Penguins from that chest patch is what the patch is. Really love it.
There's no company like Upper Deck in paying attention to the details that come with it, like game used or match used stuff. It's not surprising to hear you say that, but it still gets me excited just listening to you talk about the level of detail they put into that card.
Yeah, I'm really a big fan on the matching the photo of the player with the patch that's used, whether it be a home or away or an alternate. It's a nice touch. It really brings the card together. And for me, it made this card a must-have above all the other limited logos cards because there's none that featured this jersey. And then they just took it to that next level with the picture pairing.
Sure. So just real quick, how long ago did you acquire the card?
I'd say I acquired this card maybe a year and a half ago, maybe a year ago. But after some trouble, which I suppose is indeed the chase.
It is. And how long before you acquired it, how long did you become aware of it and decide that you wanted that to be part of your PC?
Yeah, so I guess I kind of alluded to here earlier. Like I said, that Crosby was my main PC, but Malkin and Fleury, I wanted a nice card. But when I know baseball very, very well, and I know all the sets, and I know all the players. In hockey, I do not have that same knowledge. I didn't know the sets the way I did in other sports. So I just kind of let stuff pass me by. Saw it on Instagram. Every now and again would make a little browse through eBay. And I just wanted to be inspired by something just awesome. And one day I came across this in a story sale of who I would classify as, a flipper making the rounds at card shows, putting up story sales. But I've heard it said, a lot of people hate on that, but I've heard it said before too that sometimes the flipper digs up things that the collector may not have, been able to dig up themselves and puts them out there on the market. This was definitely one of those cases. And I saw that as I was clicking through maybe 10, 15, 20 slides on the story. So I saw that and I just kind of stopped in my tracks. And the price was high. It was something maybe around like $400 or something. And I was like, whoa, that's a lot. Keep in mind, a cheap Fleury jersey auto or patch auto, you could get in the low hundreds probably. So, it was definitely a big price increase. And I was hesitant. And I put on the brakes and I tried to haggle a little bit because, I had sticker shock. And in the time that I haggled, someone else, a wiser person, had swooped in and just taken it. And I was sad, and I was committed to get that card like I never had been committed to hunt down any card before. I was like, I am gonna find that card.
Isn't that reflex funny? As I've talked to people for this Chase limited series, without exaggeration, the one common theme that keeps coming up is when somebody finally finds the card that they want, is they do something to self-sabotage, where they decide to make an offer instead of just buying it, or they decide to wait, or or on two separate stories, the card pops up while they're going to a movie, right? And one of them, by the time the movie's over, the card is gone, right? Whereas the other one has to be texting or messaging like during the movie and like apologizing to their girlfriend. There's all these things that are happening. I'm gonna take us a little bit on a tangent just briefly, but what do you think
Please.
it is about us that we know what we want, and when we finally have what we want, and when we're confronted with what we want, we think maybe I can get more of a deal on it. Like, what happens in that moment of truth?
I really don't know. I think there's just something about so much of the card space, the whole eBay thing. I mean, if you're like me and you deal only and really, I rarely go to get stuff on auction unless it's my favorite stuff. I like to dabble in the best offer world. Just in your blood is just you're like, well, I gotta send an offer, or I just gotta drop a light, gotta put it on the watch list, and maybe they'll send an offer. It's the card show. All you see around you and put in front of you is videos of people making offers, and when you see all those card show videos and stuff put in front of you, and you go to card shows, you're like, I'd be silly to pay what's on that sticker. Like, surely I can get it for less. Well, maybe you could have if there wasn't a bunch of other people who also are swirling around in the sea and might be wiser. Because let me tell you, every time that I do that, I'm like, oh, I'm at a nickel and dime. You really do regret it. And I know people who have very successful collections. I mean, I'll shout out like Wax Museum Podcast, like wonderful podcast, wonderful basketball collector. He's a proponent of the nickel and dime in a lot of cases because even though he is a very true collector, has a very big collection, he nickel and dimes. Even when it's a card he really wants, and he contends that it does helps him make his collection bigger, which is definitely true. It does give you more money, but I don't know. I don't think I'm about that anymore. Certainly not after this case.
Yeah, so tell us what happened. So the card was gone, right?
Card's gone. Card's
And
gone, and now the hunt begins. Is
and
how
then
this
so how,
goes.
yeah, exactly. So how did you then hunt? What was your process?
Well, you do all the basics. You go, you set up the various iterations of the eBay save search, catch all of your, different degrees of specificity. You're gonna get everything under the sun. You get excited if you see the blue circle, even though the net is pretty broad, so it's most likely not what you wanted. But then I was fairly aggressive. I mean, I reached out to the seller and I was like, "Hey, can you put me in contact with the buyer?" Which is maybe kind of questionable. As the seller, I don't know if you really should give someone the information of who the buyer was. It's not really their business, but I did ask that, and I forget if he told me or if I just stalked enough pages. And it was a Western Pennsylvania person who purchased the card, and I do follow a lot of those accounts. I saw the card come up regardless, and I'd found the account on Instagram of the guy who had it. And I messaged him, as people do, whenever, if you ever change your mind, or if you want a couple more bucks now, just let me know. You got a buyer. And he's like, no, I really like this card. That's why I bought it. I don't want to move it. And I'm like, okay, respect. After all, it is this person's card. And, I don't want to hassle the guy. He bought the card, deserves to enjoy it in peace and not be bothered by someone like me. But I, I began what I've never done this for any other card. I began the what I'll call the respectful reminder, where every 3 months or so surfaced, sent him a message. I'm like, hey, just checking in. If you ever want to move that flurry, you just let me know. And he's like, okay, don't want to move it, but thanks for the love on the card. Cool, cordial. A year or so goes by, maybe a year and a half, and he messages me and he's like, hey, circumstances have changed. I really like that Fleury, but I'm thinking about moving it. But, I wanted to give you the first crack at it because you have asked me about it. That was very nice of him. He didn't have to do that. You definitely could put something on auction at that. He's not obligated to say that to me. He could shop it around. He could also extort me because, he knows that I have a lot of interest. But he said, if you wanted it what I paid or what I paid plus a couple bucks, I forget, it's yours. And I was like, absolutely. Send that right on over. Like, no doubt, no brainer. And I felt very fortunate because he didn't put me through the ringer on the price, which he could have because he knew how interested I was. And he gave me that opportunity. And it felt like it had all paid off. And some cards you get in the mail and you think, oh, I really liked it, but is it really all that I'd hoped for? Maybe not. This one has been. This card has been like top 3 to top 5 for sure in my collection of all the cards I have, including many cards of higher value than it ever since I got it. I'd say probably top 3. And that is a coveted spot in the collection. Top 3 is not easy. And so I was super excited when I got this one in.
What was it like when? So I can imagine what it was like when you got it in. What was it like when you got the message from him?
I was shocked. I honestly never believed that it would happen. Because keep in mind, this whole year to year and a half, I'm also stalking eBay. Not one of these comes up. I mean, we're talking about a card that over 10 years old, out of 30. I don't think people who are ultra modern collectors only understand. Like, they see like Prism Gold out of 10 of like new Prism product. And they're like, oh, this is out of 10. But like, you see these around. Well, sure you do, because it's brand new. It's high value. It's floating around. They're not all locked up. When you're dealing with cards that are 10 years old or more and you get into print runs that are like sub 50 or so, they are not that easy to come across. They can be quite difficult, especially if they're desirable. After having no luck on eBay, I kind of thought it was all over, but I was just so shocked. And immediately, like we said, this time I learned my lesson. It was I'll pay right now. We're not doing any funny business. We're just gonna lock it up.
And especially, you mentioned older cards, low print run, low serial number, whatever. But also, I've noticed, and you might agree or disagree, that the less iconic a player is, the harder it is to find of those players. So you can find cards of Ovechkin, LeBron, those types of players that are popping up, but it's sort of the supporting players, the good, but maybe not, iconic players, legendary players that are harder to find, which makes someone like this one even more impossible.
Yeah, right. I've seen the Lemieux, for example. Now Fleury will be a Hall of Famer, but obviously not like a Lemieux level. But I've seen the Lemieux out of 25 way more times than I've seen this Fleury out of 30. And I think it's due to, like you said, the notoriety of a player as you move down the hierarchy does get harder, especially when the cards get old. But also, I reached out. Oh, I forgot to add this part. I reached out to all the Fleury PCs that I knew, there were a couple super PCs and they had one locked up. And they're like, yeah, like it's not going anywhere, but I don't know of any spares. I wish you luck though. But they all mentioned how much they liked this card because of that patch specifically, how that patch isn't featured in any other patch autographs really. And so that made it extra hard to hunt down.
So you already indicated the card arrives and you just kind of look at it and you sort of have it there. Now when you take it out, when you look at it, whatever, do you think of the story about what you went through to get it? How does it fit into the larger PC of yours?
Well, I mean, it is certainly untouchable. And, as someone who puts in a very limited amount of funds, every 2 weeks, I put in a very small, modest amount into my card account. I'm not dealing with a lot of new money. So I do find myself flipping through, assessing the collection to purge, to buy new stuff. This one is not remotely close to that. This is at the cream of the crop. And every time I look at it, I'm just so happy that I found such a good card. And I can't think of a better card. Like, it's something crazy as a collector. And when we are always find ourselves chasing the next best thing. Like we get a card, we're like, oh, I could level it up. I could get something a little better. This card I look at and I don't think there is a single Fleury card that I would want more. Plain and simple. And that is probably what makes this the peak of it. I don't know if there's another player that I feel that way about, where I have the card that I don't think can be improved upon. So that makes this one very special.
So many great ideas and so many good messages here as we wind down our time together. I guess I would say is what do you think this says about the value of persistence, but not badgering? Going back to the relationship that you built with this guy, what do you think this says about that side of collecting and the idea of just making yourself there and around without being overwhelming?
I think that collectors in this space always have and still continue to this day to treat each other with a lot of respect. In collecting circles, there is a lot of respect and there are deals made and opportunities given that would never be afforded to someone who might be referred to as an outsider, a flipper. Don't get me wrong, I also engage in some of that activity. I have no shame for it. But when you make real relationships with people, when you're a collector, when you come at them like another human and not as someone who's trying to pull one over on someone and get a good deal, and you just approach them as what they are, a collector. You bond over cards. People want to do goodwill to people that treat them with respect. And I think that not hounding someone is treating them with respect and, giving them space, but also trying to help yourself, but, not at their expense. And I think that, goodwill always returns goodwill back to you. And it's a good way to go about life in general. And it certainly has always done me well in cards.
Robbie, on Instagram, he is 412 Sports Cards. Thank you for sharing your story of the chase. Really, really appreciate it, and congrats.
Thank you, Dave.